I mean, I had put on a face this whole, I could get through it. And I did. And I got the master's degree. The kids survived. And then one day I was just like, why am I still here? I felt like he didn't love me. It wasn't he didn't stick around for me. He stuck around because he had to. And one day I was just like, you know what? I'm all done. And he was shocked. And the kids were shocked. Everybody was shocked. Everybody thought like we had it all together. We were
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Wednesdays with Watson podcast. I am sitting here with Tammy Williamson. If you guys have not listened to the episode before this, that's okay. You can always go back and listen to it. But Tammy has agreed to have a conversation with me today based on a conversation that I had with she and her ex-husband, as we, as you know, are in a season on forgiving trauma makers. That interview was we recorded it on in an evening, and I think that none of us really kind of expected what we got from that interview. It was raw, it was real, it was vulnerable. And so I've sent the episode to both Tammy and to Jeff prior to having single conversations with them, which both of those episodes are dropping today. And so you can hear Tammy speak, you can hear Jeff speak. We will no doubt at one point come back all together, the three of us, after this interaction, as we seek to understand the pain of infidelity. And there are so many people out there that have experienced this, yet they still want to, as we talked about in that episode, seek Jesus. And so Tammy is on the, I don't want to say victim, Tammy, but you're on that side of it. So I really want to dive in. But first of all, welcome back to the Wednesdays with Watson podcast. This is your third time. So you're inching right up there with some of my people that are on all the time.
Thank you.
So I sent the episode to you guys to listen to. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to do that. You were there, so you might not. It might have been a little bit too painful for you to listen to. But I do want to ask you. So we recorded that episode one evening. I think we ended up hitting the stop button at like 9:30 or something like that. What was that experience like for you? Because you were super vulnerable, and I'm going to ask you some questions about some of that vulnerability. But I'm curious to know, and especially listeners, if you've listened to the episode, if not, you can listen to it after this one. What did you feel like? What was going on in your mind and your heart when we hit? Because you like pieced out. Like I exited out of the podcast and you were gone, and Jeff and I were like, "Where'd she go?" Tell me what the experience of being very honest with our listeners as to what happened in your marriage. What was that experience like for you?
I don't quite understand the question, though, like what happened
Well, no,
or
how did you feel after?
okay. Um, I think usually I describe it as like a sucker punch in the gut.
Yeah.
Just pretty shocking. But after our conversation, because it'd been so many years, it was maybe just some more healing, just kind of a little bit more healing because it had been so long and we could talk about it being a little more vulnerable by then.
Yeah. And that's my hope. And that's why I wanted to speak to each of you individually too, because that was my hope. You know, when I started this podcast, it was never my thought. But I've had so many guests come back and go, after the interview with you, I did X or I did Y, because we are bringing to highlight things that are painful. And so I'm just going to jump right into it. As we talk about what happened, and again, listeners, if you've not heard, go back and listen to that episode, or listen to this one and then go back. But we are talking about forgiving infidelity. Tammy was on the wrong side of that whole thing. And so I want to talk to you a little bit. And I kind of want to go straight for the jugular at first, because you found out that he was having an affair and then waited 15 or 16 years before you divorced him because you did not want your kids to grow up in a broken home. And
Yes.
so how were you able, because we're talking about forgiveness here, right? And so for 15 years, you guys changed churches. You even mentioned we would walk around and hold hands. We wouldn't let the kids sit in between us, all of that. What was the posture of your heart looking back on it now during those 15 years? Because you told us in that interview that you didn't forgive him until after the fact, and until after you left even. How were you able to live 15 years in what seems like harmony, because he was shocked when you asked for the divorce? How were you able to do that?
I think the biggest thing was that I was so focused on making sure my children understood what marriage was supposed to look like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I had to be the example because they didn't know what had happened. They didn't know until I asked for the divorce.
So they were pretty
So,
shocked.
yes.
Yeah. Jeff mentions in that interview that you would, I'm trying to think of a delicate way to say this because I never know who's listening, but that in terms of being his wife, some of that stuff you did out of obligation. And you even mentioned sometimes like when you guys were teaching classes and stuff that you just couldn't deal, like you would volunteer for the nursery or something like that. Looking back on it now, and again, we're on this season of forgiveness. Do you agree with him, first of all, that some of the things that you did, especially as his wife, was out of a sense of duty?
I don't know if it's out of sense of, well, kind of, yes, but the duty would be to my children to make sure that they understood what a relationship should look like so that when they got older, that they would be able to function in a married relationship. There was never fighting, arguing, any of that. And I needed them to understand like you could still live peaceably even once they do find out, like with somebody that has harmed you.
Yeah. You talk a lot about, and most marriages stay together for the kids. And I'm not here to put a value label on that at all. But it's really, really important to you. And I think I know the answer to this question, but for listeners, are you from a broken home?
No, neither one of us were.
So it's interesting to me that it was so paramount for you to see a healthy marriage. Now, Jeff mentioned that years and years went by without you telling them that you loved them. Do you think the kids noticed that?
Yes. One of my children actually asked me one day, maybe 6 years ago, Mom, why is it that it seems like Dad loves you more than you love him? So I think they noticed.
So what did you say?
And I said, oh, something to the effect of, we had a lot of struggles in the past.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And so when you asked for the divorce, were they just as shocked as Jeff was?
100%.
Yeah.
The room was literally silent.
And all the kids were technically out of the house except for one, if I remember correctly.
No, there were three that were still living with
Okay.
us, but only one was under the age of 18.
Gotcha. Oh, so okay, understood, understood. And so, did you just read? So you mentioned on that episode, I thought to myself, why am I staying? And so that's why you asked for the divorce. Do you feel, and this is, and again, remember we have an edit button. Do you feel that you fought for the marriage, or you were just waiting it out? Like you said to him, you actually used the terms, "You got 15 years to prove me wrong."
I
And so that
did.
and so we know that that's the opposite of forgiveness, obviously, but it's a very painful situation. I let me go back up for a second. What would you have needed to see from him in those 15 years that you didn't see that ended up in you still getting a divorce?
I think the way I worded it was, you have 17 years to change my mind. And I only waited 16, but I felt like I was close enough. But I just, that's because our youngest child was an infant when I found out. So that's why I said 17, because,
Right, right. Doing the math. Yeah.
um, and he did make a lot of positive changes. He really did. Way different. Like he actually started doing dishes, or he would sometimes want to go places with us. Whereas when the kids were younger, sometimes I would tell him like, I'm going such and such place with the kids. Do you want to come? And he would say, I'm not interested. Often, like often. Um, so those were the kind of things I was looking for to see if he would start doing, and he did a lot of them. But then there were still some things that I could tell weren't genuine.
Okay. Can you say a little bit more about that?
There was a couple times when maybe I just happened to, because we had a counter in the kitchen and I came into the kitchen and he was sitting on the other side of the counter and I could see what was on his phone. And I would say, "Oh, who's that?" Or what are you watching? And that's when I like
So
the
huge trust issues. Yeah.
and would definitely have been doing something. I don't know who he was talking to or what he was doing, but it wasn't it. He made it very clear that it wasn't what he should be doing. He
Right.
didn't tell me what it was. I didn't ask what it was. Like we didn't go any farther in the conversation because I knew in that moment the way he reacted that it wasn't where
Gotcha.
he should.
So it sounds like the trust was never restored. And let me ask you this, because there, it's very likely that he could have done everything that you asked him to do, but the posture of your heart and having been on the other side of infidelity and, my ex had a porn addiction and all kinds of things. I tell people all the time, it's a very special kind of betrayal, especially like with people like us who were brought up in church, and it's just a special kind of betrayal. Unless you've and that's why we're doing this podcast, is for the no doubt most people that are clicking on this have been on the other side of infidelity. If statistics tell us anything, we think we know that 1 in 2 marriages end in divorce, and who knows how much infidelity goes on. And so but it sounds like trust was never restored, and you couple that with that betrayal in your heart. I just remember, and I wonder if the experience is the same for you. It was like I got to a point where I was numb and I just didn't care. Like he could have changed and said he was blue in the face, but the betrayal had become so egregious by that point that I couldn't, and I wasn't in church and I wasn't in counseling and I wasn't talking to anybody. I couldn't find my way clear through that First Corinthians 13 kind of love, where I'm holding no record of your wrongdoings. Is that experience similar to you? Like the pain was just so much in your heart that had he done everything that you wanted to do you think that you needed him to do? So he didn't have the phone. He's not talking to people. You're not looking at the back of his head. He's not playing games. He's trying to better himself. Do you think that would have been enough, or do you think just the simple pain and betrayal is really what drove your decision?
I think it would have been enough because I really thought that he would get there after some of the changes he made, and he did for a while, but then I feel like maybe he regressed there towards the end, and then I was like,
Yeah.
why am I doing this?
Yeah. One of the things that was difficult for me on that interview, because it was a Zoom and I can look into both of your eyes, he owns what he did. He specifically says, I am not a good person. I was not chasing God. How does that make you feel? Does that feel like a placation, or does it feel genuine to you?
That one's a hard one because he's always been very eloquent. He's always had the right words and known what to say. So the only way I would ever be able to tell was his actions, because his words were always the right words.
Right. What are his actions towards you now? Now, if people listen to that interview, they know, and hopefully they'll go back. But what is your perception of his actions towards you now? Do you feel like when he speaks, he's speaking truth, or do you feel like he's still just doing the song on pony dance because, like you said, he has the right words?
No, I believe 100% he's there now.
Okay. Gotcha.
Just even for instance, last weekend, I moved and he was one of the only people there. And he carried all the furniture, and like it wasn't pleasant because there wasn't very many people to help. Even in the morning when we were moving out of the house, and none of my kids were there. Some of them are in town, but even the ones that were in town weren't there. And he was.
Yeah. He is definitely, and again, if you listen to that interview, and I talked to him later this afternoon, he said to me that he said to both of us on that interview, I'd marry Tammy tonight. Let's talk about, believe it was 2 Christmases ago, he asked you to marry him again and put a ring on your finger. What happened?
We had kind of talked about it a little bit here and there, and that would consider possibly getting back together. And then I love the Tampa Bay Lightning, and we went to a Lightning game. I thought we were just hanging out, and all of a sudden, like, it's in between the period, and I'm on my phone, and he's like, "Look up there," and he had put on the board, "Will you marry me?" And he gets down on his knees, and some people behind us are videotaping, and I was like, "What is happening?" And so I kind of felt like he rushed it, and then
And then it was
I was taken.
grandiose.
Right. I didn't know these people near me, and I didn't want to know these people, and I just felt like it was maybe for his benefit, not mine. And
Yeah.
that really set us way back, like way back.
Okay. And that, that's fair. I mean, that's a pretty big way to do it. It would have been probably much more intimate in the conversations that you're having together. One of the things that broke my heart in that interview that we talked about, when you said, when you talk about being sucker punched, it makes my heart hurt. But then you also said, I felt so alone. So you're essentially, even though he's bringing in money and he's there physically, he's doing things better, some of the things he's moving towards you, but then you can still see some regression. And what really, frankly, the way you describe it to me is selfishness. Like if he's on his phone, and because at some point I think a counselor would have said to both of you guys, listen, Jeff, Tammy's not going to trust you. So you have to go over and above your means to not have her have anything to question. You know what I'm saying? Like give her the password to your phone, put covenant eyes on your phone, have an accountability partner, do all of the things. But in the church world, because you guys changed churches, started teaching classes together and all the things, but you said, I felt so alone. And even I can still hear you in that interview saying that now. Is that in some ways the hardest part of this to forgive?
No, I think the hardest part is that he didn't consider what would happen to our children when he made his choices.
Hadn't thought about that.
Why would he think of them first? Because that's all I ever thought of.
Yeah. Has he, to your knowledge, talked to them individually and owned what he's done?
Oh yes, he actually, when I asked for the divorce and we sat them all down to tell them, some of them were virtual and some were in person, whoever was in the area. All I said was, I just wanted you to know I asked your father for a divorce, and then he told them why.
Wow.
Nobody asked. He told them, so he did own it.
Okay. Let's talk about the child that I didn't know. That was a mic drop moment for me. That was conceived out of said infidelity. Is that still a sticking point for you?
Like I don't know her. I don't even think she knows. To my knowledge, she doesn't know. But yeah, that was kind of a big deal.
Yeah, I can imagine.
When we did sit the children down after he told them what had happened and all of that, I did say right at the very end, oh yeah, and you might have a sister. I kind of, it was probably a jab. It was
right.
probably
Sure.
could have worded it better, but at that moment all the feelings were back.
Yeah.
So,
and they're back now, and they were back when we did that interview. And so I can't tell you how much I appreciate this. One of the other things you said in that interview that just broke my heart, I want to speak truth into you. You said one of the reasons why you stayed so long besides the kids is you said, and I quote, no one would want me. And I want you to know, I want to speak truth over you. That's just not true. Should the Lord decide that it's not that a reconciliation story between you and Jeff or is not the story that he's telling, even though your kids are all grown and out of the house and most of them in the military, if I'm not mistaken. So I think you guys did okay with that. But I want you to know that that's not true. And I want listeners out there that heard you say that know that that isn't true, because sometimes marriages can't be restored. This is we are both Christians. We were brought up to believe that divorce is a sin under all circumstances, but we do know that adultery and abuse do not fit in that. And so it's somewhat of a, and I don't mean this cavalier when I say this, a free pass in that regard from sinning, if you will. But should this marriage not be restored, I want you to know that's not true. Even though now is different from 4 years ago, because I think you still had some kids at home 4 years ago. You still have 6 kids. You still are divorced, and you still have trust issues. And so, but that's not true. I just wanted to make sure that I threw that. Make sure I want to throw that in there. You did a good job of talking to other people out there like you who are navigating forgiving infidelity. And your answer when I asked you, what would you tell other people in your case, was just 2 words: seek Jesus. And I think that is so profound. Can you help us know a little bit how you're doing that right now in this lane? And I'm going to double question this, and I'm going to kind of pad it, because the second one is a bit of a mic drop moment. But is there any possibility for the restoration?
I think for right now, I have not been doing it as I could or as I should, not nearly enough.
You mean seek Jesus?
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
But I intellectually and in my heart know that that's what I should be doing.
How can we support you in doing that besides prayer?
I was going to say prayer. You stole my answer. I mean, because I know what I need to be doing. It's just a matter of doing it. The same way when you know you need to be going to the gym and you sleep
It's
in.
painful, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The gym is painful. The dentist is painful. Lots of doctor's appointments are painful, but we still have to go because, you have to have pain sometimes to heal. And I think that is absolutely true in this situation. I know that when I first got divorced, I threw a Bible across the room. And like you, I know the stuff in my head, but I wasn't seeking Jesus because my behaviors, especially the behaviors I was using to cope with the divorce, were not honoring to the Lord. And so, as my follow-up question, asking you if you ever think that there's an opportunity for restoration of the marriage, we know that the seek Jesus part has to come first. And certainly have been praying for you and will continue to pray for you as you do that. And I love that verse in Matthew 6:33, seek ye first the kingdom of God, then all these things will be added unto you. I think the question remains is, are you ready for what God tells you? Because what if, Tammy, God says to you, Tammy, because one of the things that struck me on that interview that we did when I said, do you still love Jeff? It wasn't a yes. It wasn't it was sure. And if you go back and watch the video and you look at his face, it just drops. And it's a bit of a defense mechanism on your part, I think. But I do believe that you love him with the 1 Corinthians 13 kind of love, keeping no records of wrongdoing. Do you think that seeking Jesus and asking him, and this is a good opportunity too, that the last episode that we dropped before yours and Jeff's was Dr. Willie Rice's on forgiveness. And he talks about how forgiveness is not formulaic, it's not on a timetable, and sometimes it's all the time. Are you willing to posture yourself before the Lord and go, hey, Lord, this hurts. And it hurts again and again and again and again. But if the restoration of the marriage is something that you want, will you help me? Are you willing to be that vulnerable before an almighty God?
Absolutely.
Will you? Because I'm going to ask, not publicly, but I will.
Will I?
Will you go before the Lord with an open heart and say, this still hurts, clearly. I am still holding on to, well, you're not holding on to it as much as, because I believe that you've forgiven him. But the whole point of this is just because you forgave somebody doesn't mean that the consequences don't exist. And so your soul was imprinted with the pain of this betrayal. And your soul was imprinted with the 15 years of faking it. Your soul was imprinted with, your body is keeping the score. Your body is telling the story. And so your answer to those out there like you, seek Jesus, is the answer. But so oftentimes I remember, and I think I even mentioned it on that interview with you guys after I got divorced, one time the pain was so intense that I was leaning up against, I wrote about it. I wrote a journal about it, but I was leaning up against a wall because I thought I was going to pass out. And finally I just threw my hands up and said, okay, God, I can't do this anymore. It hurts too bad. Would you, would you help me? It started with, would you help me? Then it started with praying for him, as the Bible tells us to. I mean, I don't think Jeff is your enemy, nor do I think John was mine, but pray for those who despitefully use you. And then it started with, would you change his heart? Would you, because I can tell you, Tammy, that had John Watson found his way to Jesus in counseling, that I probably would have tried to reconcile with him because I believe that it's that important. And so I guess the long answer to your question, to my question is, are you willing to go before the Lord for 30 days and say, Lord, please show me what I need to heal in this situation and what you want from this situation? Because he may not. I mean, I think that Cheryl Rice was right when she said one of God's favorite works is reconciliation. But I wonder if just for 30 days you would commit to a one sentence prayer, Lord, what do you want from me in this situation? Because what I see across screens and on interviews and conversations and text conversations is a whole bunch of this, like we got kind of one foot in both camps. Like I can see where you want restoration of the marriage, but I can also see the sheer terror that what if I get hurt again? Because I even made the comment on that podcast interview that I don't date because I would not survive another divorce. So I know what you're feeling. And so I guess I'm just asking you, and we would never make this public, but I certainly would stay in contact with you for 30 days. One phrase, Lord, what do you want from me in this situation? Because that is doing what you told people to do, seek Jesus. And you might in 30 days come back and say, Amy, I'd like to come back on and tell people what happened. This is uncharted territory for the Wednesdays with Watson podcast, because one way or the other, we're going to walk through this with you and Jeff, and listeners are going to understand what happens when we come to the Lord with a posture in our heart to seek Jesus. And he is the only one that can help forgive such egregious acts. And he is the only one that can heal your broken heart. It is by his stripes we're healed. And so that's my question to you as we close. For 30 days, would you commit to me as your friend that you would use that one word with the Lord? What do you want from me in this situation?
Absolutely.
Okay. And again, we after those 30 days, so it is February the 25th. I'm going to put on my calendar to check in with you on the 25th of March and say, or please feel free to text me or whatever and say, this is what the Lord is showing me. Because what I know is the Lord says, if any man lacks wisdom, let him ask of God. And what I don't want us to continue to see is you in this limbo of pain, and Jeff in this limbo of, is she going to come back? Or is she not going to come back? Because one of the things that runs through my brain is, he said, I had 15 years to see if I could be good enough. And so I think there's some uncovering there on that with him. But 15 years, we both agree, you love him. You would not, that had to sting for you to hear too. I waited 15 years to see if I would be good enough. And so, and I'm going to ask the same of him. 30 days, ask the Lord, what do you want from me in this situation? And we both know that the Lord answers when we call, and that by his stripes we are healed. And I want nothing more from this. If in 30 days you're like, I got clarity, I got peace, Jeff and I are going to be friends, we're going to co-parent, and I'm moving on with my life. Or I still don't have clarity, so I'm going to ask for another 30 days what the Lord wants from me. And after that 30 days, I'm going to, but all I'm asking is that you do what you told listeners to do. And that is, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and then all these things will be added unto you. And I know that we serve a Savior, a suffering Savior, who will answer that prayer. And I know, and if you want to, you're more than welcome to come back onto this podcast. And so there's that. Then I want to ask you one more question. There's two people in every dance, two people in every marriage. When you look back on the failure of your own, have you been able to forgive yourself for any part that you contributed?
I believe so.
Good. Okay, good. All right. Well, as Phil Baker's song plays us out of the podcast, it's a song called Marked by You. And it talks about being just marked by Jesus. And what you've done today here with me and what you did on the interview before is living out the gospel. It is being vulnerable to people who know you, and who know you and Jeff and who know the story. And it allows me to operate in this place where I love, where I can be an objective party, and you guys are willing to kind of share it with my listeners. And so I don't know if there were, I hope that after this 30-day period, the three of us could come back together and talk again and see where we are. And who knows what the Lord is going to do. But at some point, I think both of you need to find the peace that we're either going to be really good friends and we're going to co-parent well, or there is still something here because I still love you with the 1 Corinthians 13 love. And am I going to always have to take this hurt before the Lord? Probably. But for him to, and he'll hear this interview, and maybe for the first time here, well, that probably was a really boneheaded decision to have my phone after I had had an affair. I needed to go over and above to, every time I went to the bathroom, she needs to know it, have software on my phone, the 360 app or whatever Tammy needs to get past those walls that I put up there because of the betrayal, I'm going to do. And so we'll see what happens in 30 days, because I do think that seeking Jesus is the answer. So thank you for being here today, and we will see where the Lord takes us from here. 30 days, you promised me, right?
I'm there.
All right, girl. Well, I love you. Thank you for being here with me today. And listeners, we will be back. Jeff's episode will be after this one. So right there in your app, you'll see Jeff, you'll hear the interview with Jeff. And then in 30 days, we will see where we are. But pray for this couple. Pray for Tammy. Pray for Jeff. Pray for their children, and pray for that the gospel will be shown through this very painful situation. And so we will be back in 2 weeks with those episodes. And so make sure you don't miss those in the month of February, as we are talking about forgiving infidelity. Also, don't forget about the giveaway that we have going on with Becky Wade. That will be in each of the show notes as to what you need to do, but it's a significant giveaway of her new book. And so click there. If you want to know the star of the story, click that Contact Amy button, and I would love to introduce you to him. Tammy, thank you for being here, and I'm going to proclaim over you what I proclaim over everybody, and I think this is the third or fourth time for you, but the more I work in the field, the more I know that people need to know this. Tammy and listeners, you are seen, you are known, you are heard, you are loved, and you are valued. And Tammy, I want you to know I have seen you today. I have heard you today. I love you. You're intrinsically valuable, and you matter. And so does your pain, and so does your healing, and so does where you go from here. And as you seek Jesus, it is my prayer that you will get the wisdom that you need to know what's next for you, instead of just to slide through life with funny memes on Facebook, which still make me laugh, but to go there into the dark places knowing that by his stripes you are healed. So thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Let my life glorify you and teach me to